All right, folks, get ready, because today we are diving deep, deep into the book of Psalms, all 150 of them. That's right, you heard that correctly.
Ambitious, yeah, but the source material you gave us is amazing.
It's like this incredible guidebook, right, to like the human soul.
I like that.
Joy, sorrow, doubt, praise, every human emotion is in here.
And it's fascinating how these poems, how they manage to be like both deeply personal and also communal all at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, and speaking of powerful language, one thing that really stuck out to me in the source material was how these Psalms use like metaphors and similes.
Totally.
Just to paint these really vivid pictures in your mind.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, take Psalm 18.2, for instance. It describes God as like a high ridge and a stronghold. And you can like almost feel a sense of security, right? And protection in those words.
It's like, they're trying to like convey the feeling of finally finding shelter from a dangerous world.
Exactly. Yeah, and the source material even points out that this specific image of a high ridge might actually be a reference to, like, the landscape of ancient Israel.
Oh, wow.
Which adds this whole other layer of meaning to the text.
So it's not just like, poetic flourish.
Right.
It's grounded in their lived experiences,
Exactly. And, I think that's one of the things that makes the Psalms so relatable, even, thousands of years later.
Right.
They, like, tap into these universal human experiences, right?
For sure. Okay, so we've got these, like, powerful metaphors. But there was also something in the source material about Psalm 18 potentially being written for, like, a coronation ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
It is. A lot of scholars believe that some of the Psalms were actually written for very specific occasions, like coronations or like festivals and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So it adds this really interesting layer of like historical and ritual significance to them.
So we're not just like, reading poems. We're also getting these glimpses into like the culture and the practices of the people.
Exactly. Yeah, and having that historical context, can really change how we understand the text, I think.
Totally. Okay, let's maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about just the emotional range of these Psalms,
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's kind of like a roller coaster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like one minute you're in the depths of despair and the next you're soaring with praise.
We put it perfectly. Yeah, the Psalms really don't shy away from like raw emotion. They give us this vocabulary, right, for how to express the full spectrum of human experience, from like lament to thanksgiving.
Yeah, totally. And it's not even just about like individual emotions either, right?
Yeah.
Because the source material pointed out how the Psalms were often adapted and used in communal worship.
Yeah, that's a great point. They like provide the shared language for expressing our faith or our doubt or just, everything in between.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like, whether you're feeling super joyful or you're feeling heartbroken, lost or found, there's a psalm that speaks to that experience.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes them so enduringly relevant.
For sure.
They connect us to this community of faith that like stretches back thousands of years, which is just incredible.
Okay, so we've got the emotional roller coaster, the vivid imagery, we've got the historical context. But I also noticed there's some like unique structural elements to the Psalms too.
Yeah.
What's up with these like acrostic Psalms? What are those about?
Those are fascinating. So take Psalm 119, for example. Each stanza in that psalm actually begins with a consecutive letter of the Hebrew alphabet.
So it's like a word puzzle almost.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It's a real demonstration of literary skill and just like this really unique way of weaving the like building blocks of language into the poem.
Wow, that's cool. And then what about those songs of ascent? I remember the source material mentioned that those were like potentially sung by pilgrims.
Yes.
On their way to Jerusalem.
Exactly. Imagine like a group of pilgrims, right, making their way up to Jerusalem, and they're like singing these songs as they go. It's a very powerful image of communal faith, I think.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about that. It's like we're transported back in time, watching alongside them.
Right. And then there's the mysterious Selah. Right, this word that appears like all over the Psalms, and scholars are still debating its exact meaning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like this riddle, waiting to be solved.
Wow.
Some people believe it indicates like a musical pause or maybe a moment of reflection.
Interesting.
But yeah, it adds another layer of depth to these texts.
So we've got acrostic Psalms, songs of ascent, and the like enigmatic Selah. It's clear that the Psalms are more than just like, some random poems just thrown together.
For sure.
There's like a real artistry and intentionality to how they're structured.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those structural elements, I think, they often enhance the meaning and the impact of the words themselves, you know?
Totally. Okay, I think maybe now we can dive into some of the like recurring themes that kind of run throughout these psalms, you know, and one that really jumps out to me is like this idea of God's sovereignty,
Yes,
like
absolutely.
that he's in control.
The Psalms constantly affirm like that God is ultimately in control, even when, you know, the world feels really chaotic and unpredictable.
Right, totally. Like in Psalm 93, your throne was established long ago. You were from all eternity. It's this like powerful reminder that God's reign like transcends time and
Oh,
circumstance.
sure. And even in the midst of, you know, suffering and injustice, right? The Psalms remind us that like God sees, he hears, and he will ultimately act.
That's right. There's this really strong sense of like divine justice that's like woven through these psalms.
Sure.
Like in Psalm 94, rise up, O judge of the earth, pay back to the proud what they deserve. Like it's, you know, it's this reminder that God's not indifferent to, you know, what's going on.
Right.
Okay, so we got God's sovereignty, divine justice. What else?
Another key theme that comes up a lot is the importance of God's law, not as like this set of rules, but as like a source of wisdom and guidance for living a fulfilling life.
The source material really emphasized that too.
Yes. It's not about like legalistic rule following, right?
Right.
But it's about like aligning ourselves with God's will.
For sure.
Psalm 119 beautifully captures this. Your statutes are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart.
Wow.
It's about like delighting in God's word and finding wisdom in his teachings, right?
So it's not about like being restricted by God's law,
Yeah.
but about finding freedom within it.
Exactly. And maybe one of the most like comforting themes that you see throughout all the Psalms is just God's unwavering faithfulness.
Yeah.
You know?
Like that line in Psalm 89, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn an oath to David, my servant. I will maintain my love to him forever, and my covenant with him will never fail.
Yes. It's like this promise etched in stone.
It's so powerful.
Yeah. The Psalms remind us that, you know, God's love and faithfulness are constant,
Right.
even when we feel, you know, really lost and alone.
Okay, so we've covered like a lot of ground here. Powerful imagery, raw emotions, you know, unique structural features, these enduring themes. But there was something in the source material I found super interesting. It seems like the songs were more than just like personal reflections, right? They were often like revised and adapted for communal worship.
Yes. That's a great point. The Psalms were not just meant to be like read alone, right?
Right.
They were meant to be shared, you know,
Yeah.
sung together, experienced together as like a community.
So they're not just like private prayers. They're expressions of shared faith.
Exactly. They provide this like language for connecting with God and connecting with each other, you know?
Right.
It bridges the gap between individual and communal faith. You know, one of the things that really struck me in our source material was how those communal aspects of the Psalms, how they like played a role in how the Psalms actually evolved over time.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. Like it seems that a lot of the Psalms were actually like revised and adapted over time
Makes sense.
to fit the needs of different communities and like worship settings.
So they weren't like, you know, these static texts just set in stone.
No, not at all. They were like living and breathing expressions of faith,
Right.
you know, that like evolved with the people who used them.
I love that. It's like we're tracing these footprints of faith across like centuries.
And those footprints like lead us right into the heart of like the Psalms' enduring legacy, you know?
Okay, so we've talked about how the Psalms were used in like communal worship back then, but their influence like extends way beyond ancient Israel, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, the Psalms have inspired countless musical compositions, everything from classical symphonies to like modern worship songs.
Wow, it's like they provided the soundtrack for centuries of like spiritual expression.
Right. And their influence can be seen in art, in literature, even in film. You know, one of the sources mentioned how like the imagery of streams in the Negev in Psalm 126 has been like interpreted in so many different ways throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
Like this one phrase has become like a canvas for, you know, artistic and theological reflection.
It's a great example, yeah. The Psalms are like this this wellspring of inspiration, right?
Yeah.
Offering all these possibilities for interpretation and creative expression.
Okay, so we've covered like The emotional range, the recurring themes, the literary features, historical context, communal aspects, the enduring legacy. But I feel like I still have one big question.
Okay. What's that?
Why do these ancient poems, why do they still resonate with us today? You know? What makes them so, timeless and universally appealing, do you think?
I think it's because the Psalms, they speak to the deepest longings of, the human heart.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, no matter, what your background is, what your beliefs are, your circumstances, or we all share certain, fundamental human experiences. Love, loss, joy, sorrow, hope, despair.
Yeah.
And the Psalms, they give voice to those experiences in a way that is both raw and honest, but also deeply comforting, I think.
So they're like a mirror reflecting back to us, the whole range of human emotions.
Exactly. And they remind us that we're not alone in our struggles, right?
Right.
People of faith have been wrestling with these same questions and emotions for millennia.
Because we're joining this conversation that's been going on for centuries.
Yes. And that conversation leads us right into the heart of our relationship with God.
So the Psalms connect us to our own humanity into the divine, you know?
They offer us a language for how to talk to God, how to express our deepest fears and desires, and ultimately to find solace in his presence.
One of the things that surprised me in the source material was this emphasis on the word darkness. Yeah. It appears all over the Psalms, but it's not always used in the way that I thought it would be,
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
It seems like darkness isn't always this negative symbol.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's used to represent the mystery and the hiddenness of God, or even a place of intimacy and refuge.
I like that. Yeah.
It's a different way of thinking about darkness.
It reminds us that the Psalms don't always offer these easy answers or, these really simplistic interpretations. They invite us to wrestle with complex ideas, right? And to embrace the mystery of faith.
It's they're challenging us to to go deeper.
Yes.
To move beyond the surface level.
Exactly.
And to grapple with the nuances of a relationship with God.
And sometimes those nuances are best explored through the Psalms' really unique literary features,
Okay, let's talk about that. So we've already touched on acrostic psalms and the songs of ascent. But the source material has so many other interesting examples. What about those songs that are structured as dialogues or debates?
Oh, those are fascinating. Yeah. Those Psalms, they often present different perspectives or voices wrestling with, theological questions or ethical dilemmas.
It's we're witnessing an ancient courtroom drama
right.
unfolding before our eyes.
And those dramas, they often offer these really profound insights into the nature of God or the human condition or the struggle for righteousness.
One of the sources pointed out that those dialogic psalms, they might reflect actual debates and discussions that took place in ancient Israelite communities.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's we're getting this glimpse into their religious and intellectual life,
Yeah. It reminds us that the Psalms weren't written in a vacuum.
Right.
They were products of this really vibrant and dynamic culture, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we've got these dialogues and debates. What other literary features should we be paying attention to, do you think?
Well, the use of parallelism, right? That's a hallmark of Hebrew poetry.
Right.
And it's especially prominent in the Psalms.
We talked about that a little bit earlier with Psalm 23. But I'm curious, how does parallelism actually function in the Psalms? What does it add to the text?
So parallelism often works by repeating or elaborating on an idea in two or more successive lines.
Okay.
And that creates a sense of balance or emphasis or even contrast.
So it's not just about making it sound pretty.
Right.
It's about deepening the meaning.
Exactly. So, for example, it might highlight contrasting ideas, or it might intensify an emotion,
right.
Or it might build to a climax,
It's the poet is using language to create this symphony of meaning almost.
I love that. Yeah. And that symphony is often enriched by the use of vivid imagery and metaphors, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, exactly. It's all starting to come together now.
Yeah.
The emotional depth, the literary artistry, the historical context, the communal aspects, it's all interwoven,
Yes.
into this tapestry of faith and human experience.
And it's beautiful, isn't it? And that tapestry continues to unfold,
Yeah.
as we engage with the Psalms, they like reveal new layers of meaning and beauty with each reading.
It's like we're like, peeling back the layers of an onion almost, like
What?
layer after layer of like profound truth and emotional resonance.
And sometimes those layers like reveal these really surprising and unexpected insights,
Oh, like what?
Well, for example, one of the things that struck me in the source material was the discussion of how certain psalms have been interpreted as like messianic prophecies.
You mean like pointing forward to Jesus?
Exactly. And while those interpretations, they may not have been the original intent of the psalmist,
Right.
they demonstrate how the songs have been like read and reinterpreted throughout history, right? And how they've gained these like new layers of meaning in light of Christian theology.
So it's like the Psalms are this bridge between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yes.
Connecting the promises of the past to the fulfillment in Christ.
I love that. It highlights the enduring relevance of these poems, right? They continue to speak to us today, offering, comfort, challenge, inspiration for our own spiritual journeys.
Okay, so we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
But I still feel like we've just barely scratched the surface.
Oh, there's always more to discover. That's the beauty of the Psalms, right?
Right.
They invite us to keep digging, keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions.
It's like they're this like bottomless well of like wisdom and beauty and spiritual insight.
And that wellspring is available to all of us, no matter what our background is, what our beliefs are.
One of the sources actually mentioned how the Psalms have been used by people of like so many different faiths and traditions throughout history. It's like they offer this like universal language for connecting with, with the divine. It's this common ground for people from all walks of life.
It's beautiful, right? It reminds us that the Psalms are more than just these ancient religious texts.
Right.
They're a testament to like the enduring human search for meaning and connection and transcendence.
Totally. Okay, so we've explored like, the emotional depths of the Psalms, their literary features, historical context, their connection to like, the biblical narrative and their enduring legacy. But I'm wondering like, what's the best way to like approach reading and studying them?
That's a great question. And I don't think there's like, a one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on your personal like preferences and goals,
So some people might prefer to like read them devotionally.
Yeah.
While others might like take a more academic approach.
Exactly. And there's value in both of those, right? So you might, choose to read like a psalm a day and like reflect on the meaning.
Right.
And how it applies to your life.
Or, you might go and do like a deeper study of it and look at the historical context and the structure and the theological implications and all that.
Exactly. It's about finding like what works best for you, whether that's like a quick dose of inspiration or like a deep dive into the text. And there are so many resources available to help you along the way too, like commentaries, study guides, even podcasts like this one.
Right, exactly. So there are options, for everyone.
Yeah.
But one thing that really stood out to me in the source material was just like the emphasis on engaging with the Psalms in community.
Yes.
It's not just a solitary pursuit.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. The Psalms come alive when we share them with other people, and we discuss our insights and ask questions and learn from each other's perspectives.
So it's like we're all like, pilgrims on this journey of faith.
I love that. Yeah.
Supporting and encouraging each other.
Yeah. And that journey is really enriched when we bring like all of our different voices and experiences to the table.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about reading the Psalms individually, studying them in depth, engaging with them in community. But like, what about prayer?
Yeah.
How can we use the Psalms to like deepen our own prayer lives?
That's a great question. The Psalms offer such a rich vocabulary for prayer, like a model for expressing our hopes and fears and longings to God, right?
So we can like use the words of the psalmist as a springboard for our own prayers.
Exactly. We can borrow their phrases, their imagery, like their emotional honesty. It's all right there in the text. Yeah.
And we could even like adapt their words to fit our own specific circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's no like one right way to pray the Psalms. It's about like finding what resonates with your heart,
Right.
And what allows you to connect with God in a meaningful way.
One of the sources mentioned that the Psalms were like originally written to be sung or chanted.
Yes.
Not just like read silently.
It's a beautiful image, right?
It's like They're designed to be embodied prayers,
Yes.
expressed with our whole being.
It reminds us that prayer is more than just words, right?
Right?
It's about engaging, our hearts, our minds, our bodies in a conversation with God.
So whether we're, reading the Psalms, studying them, discussing them, or, praying them,
Yeah,
it's about opening ourselves to that, transformative power in
absolutely.
these ancient texts.
Yeah. The Psalms offer a pathway to deeper intimacy with God,
Right.
a source of strength and comfort in times of trouble, and a guide for, living a life of purpose and meaning.
Okay, so we've really covered a lot in this deep dive. We've explored the Psalms from so many angles, but I feel like we've only just begun to appreciate their richness and complexity.
I agree.
And I think we've given our listeners a solid foundation,
Yeah.
for diving in and discovering all that on their own.
Yeah, I hope so. We've kind of provided a roadmap, but the real journey, right?
Yeah. It begins when we personally engage with the Psalms and let them speak to our hearts. And now for a final thought-provoking question for our listeners to consider. So after spending all this time in the songs, is there one thing you would want our listeners to take away from this deep dive? Something that maybe wasn't explicitly stated in the source material, but that kind of came up in our conversation.
That's a really good question. I think it would be this. Don't be afraid to wrestle with the Psalms. Don't be afraid to bring your doubts, your questions, your anger, even to these texts. They can handle it. In fact, they invite it.
You mean it's okay to not have all the answers, to not always feel warm and fuzzy when you're reading them?
Exactly. The Psalms, they model a faith that is raw and honest and sometimes just messy. They show us that a genuine relationship with God, it can hold all of our emotions, even the difficult ones.
That's a really powerful thought. It's like the Psalms are giving us permission to be fully human, in our relationship with God.
And in that vulnerability, in that wrestling, that's where we often discover a deeper and more authentic faith.
Okay, so don't be afraid to wrestle with the Psalms. What else?
I would also say, pay attention to the silences, the spaces between the words, the unanswered questions. The Psalms, they don't always tie everything up neatly, right? They leave room for mystery, for contemplation, for personal reflection.
It's like they're inviting us to enter into the silence with them, to sit with the discomfort and to listen for God's voice in the stillness.
Precisely. And sometimes those silences, they speak louder than words.
This has been an amazing journey through the Psalms. We've covered so much: the emotional depth, the literary artistry, the historical context, the theological implications, the enduring legacy. But, it's ultimately up to each individual to discover, what the Psalms mean for them.
You said it perfectly. The Psalms are a gift, an invitation to a deeper, richer, more authentic relationship with God and, with ourselves.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. As you continue your own exploration of the Psalms, ask yourself, what is God speaking to me through these words? What emotions are stirred within me? Where do I find myself resonating with, the ancient voices of the psalmists?
And remember, the Psalms are meant to be lived, not just read. So allow them to shape your prayers, your thoughts, your actions. Let them guide you on your own journey of faith.
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to revisit the Psalms and discover new insights on your own. Until next time, keep diving deep.